good holiday. Congress is out for 6 weeks. Don't get back till September 8th. In the meantime, we face a crisis with the Biden-Harris regime trying to jail Trump. Likely able to vote without much pushback. So they need to get back, deal with the government funding measure, and ensure that the government doesn't get any money until the Republic is protected. Call your members of Congress now at 202-225-3121.
Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update, and that's the state of play here this week in Washington, D.C. Congress is AWOL as crises abound here in Washington, D.C. related to the future of our republic. I will talk about some of those victories, defeats, and updates all together today. We have a big victory for Trump in his effort to protect himself from going to jail up in New York. New updates on Russia. They have another version of that out this week as well. New lawsuit by Judicial Watch to uncover some of the Secret Service secrets about the failures that led to Trump nearly being killed. Plus a new interesting set of documents concerning a scandal in the Pentagon, and I'm going to tie it to the craziness in the Biden White House as well. So a lot going on this week. I think first up is the news out of New York, where Judge Merchan, who is the judge in New York who presided over the kangaroo court proceeding that saw President Trump convicted of non-crimes, a truly abominable result in an outrageous process run by Democratic Party politician Alvin Bragg. Merchan himself violated the rules by the ethics rules and arguably the law by donating to the Biden campaign and Democratic operatives. And of course, he's hopelessly conflicted because of his daughter's business connections to the Democratic Party. He's declined to proceed with the sentencing he had scheduled for September 18th. I had an initial reaction to the news earlier today.
Huge victory for President Trump today. Judge Merchan backed down the Democratic donor judge who is seeking to jail Trump, has changed the sentencing date from September till after the November election. It's a big victory for Trump. It's a big victory for the rule of law. It's a big victory against the regime's effort to rig elections. But unfortunately, the harassment of Trump continues. It's happening here in Washington, D.C. with Jack Smith using another court case to try to harass Trump up until the election. Another reason Congress has got to get on the ball, get back into town, and defund Jack Smith. Be sure to share your views with Congress on this at 202-225-3121. 202-225-3121.
So, a big victory for the rule of law. They were, and I was convinced that Trump faced significant chances of being led away in chains in September if Merchan proceeded with his plans. And I think the plans were thwarted by political concerns that he would be helping Trump, by the rule of law. The Supreme Court has ruled in a way to suggest the federal courts would shut him down. And so he backed down. And now it's been set for November, what was it, 26th he set the time for. And I'm going to read you, initially he seemingly was going to proceed. President Trump had sought support from a federal court judge, a Clinton appointee, who brushed all his substantial arguments aside, and he filed an emergency appeal with the Second Circuit the night before last. I did a tweet on it to kind of give you a feel for some of the language from the appeal. Let's put that tweet up. Oh boy, I can't see it. Update: real Donald Trump legal team files urgent appeal, as I said, to prevent corrupt, compromised, and conflicted New York judicial system, namely Judge Merchan, from ignoring the U.S. Supreme Court, that ruling on the immunity and jailing Trump. And this is the language. unlawfully incarcerating President Trump in the final weeks of the presidential election while early voting is ongoing would irreparably harm the First Amendment rights of President Trump and voters located far beyond New York County, and New York County meaning Manhattan. So Judge Merchan changed his mind. It wasn't like he didn't know it would be 40 days before the election when he made the initial ruling setting the sentencing for later this month. So something happened. There's been new details about his ethics, as I noted, and let me read you a little bit from his nonsensical, dishonest decision to show you where his head is at. This matter is one that stands alone in a unique place in the nation's history, and this court has presided over it since its inception. Were this court to decide, after a careful consideration of the Supreme Court's decision in Trump, that this case should proceed, it will be faced with one of the most critical and difficult decisions a trial court faces, the sentencing of a defendant found guilty of crimes by a unanimous jury of his peers. The adjournment request has now been decided in the same way this court has decided every other issue that has arisen since the origination of this case, applying the facts and the laws and the law after carefully considering the issues and respective arguments of the parties to ensure the integrity of the proceeding is protected, justice is served, and the independence of the judiciary is kept firmly intact. What bunk, given the way he's conducted this whole charade against President Trump. He's abused him, and he's pretending he's acting independently all of a sudden. What has changed? You know what's changed? He finally admitted that the politics has changed. Unfortunately, we are now at a place in time that is fraught with complexities, rendering the requirements of a sentencing hearing, should one be necessary, difficult to execute. So what does that mean? Should one be necessary? He still hasn't ruled on the Supreme Court ruling that essentially should result in the case dying. The guilty verdicts being vacated and them having to go back to square one, because President Trump has his lawyers have quite ably detailed how the case against him has involved material and activities from his days as president that would be subject to the immunity analysis and protections that the Supreme Court has mandated the lower courts engage in if they're going to harass Trump. He hasn't even grappled with that yet. And he kind of set it up for September 16th because the writing was on the wall, right? He was going to rule, he was supposed to rule today, I think, on the immunity issue. Instead, he just kicked the can down the road. And I think the Democrats see this whole scheme as being unhelpful at this period in the election season. Thus, in accordance with certain of the grounds submitted by defendant and the reason for adjournment provided by the people, coupled with the unique time frame this matter currently finds itself in, and the imposition of the sentence will be adjourned to avoid any appearance, however unwarranted, that the proceeding has been affected by or seeks to affect the approaching presidential election in which the defendant is a candidate. Of course it's been affected by. I mean, judges who pretend that they can just operate as if there's nothing else in the world happening, it's absurd. And to pretend otherwise is dishonest. The court is a fair, impartial, and apolitical institution. He's been found by the Ethics Commission in New York, he's been dinged for giving money to political candidates as a judge, including Biden. How is he saying he's apolitical? And he says this decision advances the interests of justice. Now, so the good news is that it's been delayed. It's gone. till the end of November, November 26th. In the meantime, he still has a gag order on Trump that constrains his First Amendment rights in the middle of the campaign. So the campaign intervention, the campaign interference, the campaign rigging by the Democrat activist judge continues with the support of Alvin Bragg, the Democratic Party operator, district attorney up in New York. But at least Trump is going to be free through the end of November. Now, maybe Merchan will think better of it and kind of get a feel for the law finally and pursue the Supreme Court's strong suggestion that they begin anew and shut down this case and vacate it in its entirety. I mean, just remember how it all began. This is a misdemeanor issue. Whether the business records were manipulated in some way, there's no evidence they were. And it elevated into a felony. They let the jury pick an unnamed other crime, including a federal election crime. How does that work in any court? So the case is an abomination. And I can complain and fulminate about it all I want, but the fact is Trump was facing jail over it. Truly would have been a political prisoner in the sense his freedom would have been in jeopardy. So, for now, right? But of course the harassment continues, as I suggested earlier in my clip. Judge Chutkan, all of a sudden, the Supreme Court ruled, and she's now pushing full speed ahead to harass Trump by allowing the Jack Smith Justice Department, the Garland Justice Department, the Biden-Harris Justice Department, to upend the way things normally go and start putting on the court record all sorts of allegations of criminal conduct by Trump in a way that typically wouldn't be allowed in a case. And she's kind of accelerating the process so that this material is put on the record before the election. And again, Judge Chutkan was also saying the other day in court, I'm not letting the election get in the way of this. Of course she should be letting the election get in the way of this. First of all, there's no time constraint that requires any of this be done before November. There might be a political purpose behind it. So she's saying that she would be conducting hearings requiring Trump's presence, for instance, on election day or a day before an election or the day of a debate. I mean, the more judges say that they're apolitical, especially in cases like this, especially given their denigration and derision and contempt for Trump, their anti-Trump animus, which has been evident throughout the entire processes, certainly in New York and here in Washington, D.C., both with the prosecutors and the judges, the more you can be sure that it is political. Now, as I want to go back, play this video again because I think it's important. Are you on vacation right now? How long is your Labor Day break? 6 weeks? Well, Congress has been out for 6 weeks. Doesn't get back till next week.
Hope you're having a good holiday. Congress is out for 6 weeks. Don't get back till September 8th. In the meantime, we face a crisis with the Biden-Harris regime trying to jail Trump. Aliens likely able to vote without much pushback. So they need to get back, deal with the government funding measure, and ensure that the government doesn't get any money until the Republic is protected. Call your members of Congress now at 202-225-3121.
Yeah. Call your members of Congress. Now, I'll be talking to Congress to the degree anyone will let me talk to them. But it's much better if you talk to Congress and share your views. And so there's several issues. Now, Jack Smith and the DOJ has spent officially $35 million trying to jail Trump. $35 million. And that doesn't include how much money the White House has been spending trying to jail Trump, or the CIA and the Defense Department, all the other agencies that have been aligned against him. All of that has been funded. I shouldn't say, well, I'm trying to think, is it all of it? Well, I'm not going to do the counting in my head. Much of it has been funded by the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. So when they come back, there's a continuing resolution they have to vote on by September, meaning a continuing resolution that allows the government to continue to operate until the new Congress comes in, assuming that's how long the continuing resolution is, in 2025. And as part of that continuing resolution, as a part of allowing Congress, allowing the government to be fully funded, or funded at all, or in part, they should require Jack Smith be defunded, in my view. They should implement federal law, change federal law, upgrade federal law to ensure that no foreign nationals are able to vote in our elections. Because right now it's prohibited. They're not allowed to vote. But there's no check in place. So they could add that into the law, saying, you know, look, in order to register to vote and vote, there has to be a documentation. There has to be verification of citizenship. And you need to go back to your rolls and make sure citizens are the only ones on the rolls. Don't you think that should be a requirement for full government funding for this continuing resolution? Now, some people don't even want a continuing resolution because it's such an the word of the day, abomination. It's basically a giant, big, fat check they write to the federal government with virtually no oversight and accountability. So it seems to me the least that can be done is that we get some key measures to defend the republic. Stop the election interference and the banana republic-style efforts to rig our elections by jailing Trump through Jack Smith and other abusers. Stop foreign nationals from being able to vote with virtually no check in place other than a pinky promise and a federal law that's rarely enforced or investigated, certainly by this corrupt Justice Department. As I've noted, you know, stop funding the censorship, prohibit the censorship. There are all sorts of other things that they could throw in there. But how about one thing, huh? How about one thing? And we can't even get one thing passed as part of these continuing resolutions. Conservatives can't. And so, you know, as I said last week, you know, Kamala Harris is constantly being criticized, and correctly so, for not implementing her agenda now, saying, well, I'm going to do it later. Well, the same goes for Republicans. They oppose everything Biden's doing while fully funding it now. And they have a chance to stop that in 2 weeks. So get on the ball, get on the horn. Call your members of Congress, 202-225-3121. And if you don't know who your member of Congress is, figure it out. You know how to figure that out. The Internet's a wonderful invention. Although more seriously, all you have to do is call the switchboard. I think that you give them your zip code or your address. They probably could funnel you right through to your member. And senators, obviously, you know, there are only two in your state. Call them both. And don't worry if your members are Democrats. It has an impact. Certainly on the alien voting. I mean, the Democrats and the left are in a corner on this because no one really supports aliens voting. No, you know, few people are going to come out outright and say we should allow foreign nationals to vote with impunity, and we shouldn't have a law that makes it more difficult for them to do so. So politically, they don't want it to pass because I'm convinced they want aliens to be able to illegally vote. but publicly they're going to have a hard time making that case. So it's an achievable goal to change the law to protect us from foreign nationals hijacking our elections and stealing your votes. And so you should let your members of Congress know that, yeah, you should shut the government down, if you agree with me. Of course, if you don't, you can let your members of Congress know that as well. You should be willing to shut the government down to protect our elections from being stolen by foreign nationals. I mean, to hear the left talk about foreign interference in our elections, of course, as part of a scheme and propaganda effort to destroy Trump's reputation and pretend that he's being run by Russians, Russia, right? I'll get into more on that. But when it comes to actual foreign interference in our elections, which is taking basic steps to ensure foreign nationals aren't voting in our election, they're opposed to it. And of course, it's all part of a piece. It's perfectly consistent. They don't like voter ID. They don't like cleaning up elections. They don't like any basic election integrity measure because, in my view, they want to be able to steal elections when necessary. I mean, one thing, it occurred to me from meetings this week. We talked last week about the Supreme Court ruling that allowed Arizona to have restrictions about non-citizens being on state voter rolls, but would allow essentially, or wouldn't allow Arizona to make sure that non-citizens are on federal voting rolls. So, I mean, it's outrageous in that sense. But what's interesting is it now means, practically speaking, that every state can take actions to make sure non-citizens aren't on at least state voter rolls. Meaning voter rolls that are used, in theory, separate, you could separate the voting rolls and make them state-only voting rolls and make sure that make sure non-citizens are not on the rolls. And that can be done now. I mean, politicians want you to think there's, on every issue you care about, there's almost something important and relatively simple that can be done to achieve positive public policy results. And from Judicial Watch's perspective, in terms of transparency, accountability, and protecting the rule of law, whether it be on elections or anything else. And they want you to pretend, oh, we can't do it, or it's too hard. And it's never, and that's all a lie. All a lie. If there's a will, there's a way in our nation's politics to do something lawful, get legislation passed or change rules and regulations as the law allows, to achieve the results we're talking about. So if you want the elections better protected in November, it can be done. And Congress has an opportunity to do it when they get back. Well, speaking of Russia, it's back. So Garland and the Justice Department issued a Potemkin indictment of, I think, 2 foreign nationals, 2 Russians, who are never going to show up in court. So it's basically an indictment that's never going to be pursued, alleging that the Russians were paying an internet media company or funneling money in to an internet media company in order to advance Russian interests. And in doing so, they tied an alleged, and although to be fair to the Justice Department, they said they were just victims. A lot of conservative media content providers, social media influencers. And here's a little bit of me watching Garland, the corrupt Justice Department, who should be prosecuted for contempt of Congress, but is being protected by his cronies at the Justice Department. Here he is pretending to be concerned about Russia again.
First, this morning we unsealed an indictment in the Southern District of New York of Konstantin Kalashnikov and Elena Afanasieva, 2 Russian-based employees of RT. a Russian state-controlled media outlet. They are charged with conspiring to commit money laundering and to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act. The government of Russia continued to use RT to direct disinformation and propaganda. In the wake of Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, RT's editor-in-chief said the company had built, quote, an entire empire of covert projects designed to shape public opinion in Western audiences. We allege that as part of that effort, RT and its employees, including the defendants, implemented a nearly $10 million scheme to fund and direct a Tennessee-based company to publish and disseminate content deemed favorable to the Russian government. To implement this scheme, the defendants directed the company to contract with U.S.-based social media influencers to share this content on their platforms. The subject matter and content of many of the videos published by the company were often consistent with Russia's interest in amplifying U.S. domestic divisions in order to weaken U.S. opposition to core Russian interests, particularly its.
So all this is about is a timed indictment, as I said, that won't go anywhere, to undermine conservative views in the run-up to the election. And of course, the media took it and ran with it, right, and tied it back to the fake Russia allegations run by the prior Democrat administration, Obama, Biden, Comey, all the rest, against Trump. And all these conservative influencers who, according to the Justice Department, didn't know where the money was coming from. No American has been knowingly implicated as knowing this money was illicit. Now, assuming that the indictment is correct, and you can't assume that given the corruption of the Justice Department. But sure enough, all the left media kind of is following the dog whistle. They are following the dog whistle and implicating the social media influencers who have been caught up in this, like Benny Johnson and Tim Pool, who I know. I've worked with both of them. They're good guys, effective communicators. And they're being smeared and maligned and having their reputations diminished and attacked as a result of this Russia, Russia, Russia. And of course, who's the big kahuna they want to go after here? It's Trump. It's all about Trump in the end. I mean, $10 million spent by the Russians to influence our elections. I'm more concerned, frankly, about the tens of millions of dollars laundered through the Biden crime family to influence policy and get benefits. I'm more concerned about the election interference of that man, Garland, and Jack Smith, and the deep state, the CIA, you name it. How much money did they spend on that? $35 million. Jack Smith trying to rig the election by targeting Trump. They spent $35 million. So, I encourage you to dismiss this Russia, Russia, Russia sham indictment. Do I know it's literally a sham indictment? No. I mean, maybe there's something there. Maybe there's an illegality. For instance, they're charging a violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Hunter Biden to get it charged with a violation of Foreign Agents Registration Act. Joe Biden didn't get charged with it, even though it looked like he was working on behalf of the Chinese for a period of time. Heck, now Hunter Biden, he pled guilty to these tax charges, which is interesting because I thought Joe Biden said that he did nothing wrong. Tax charges then again were constrained and crimped and limited in order to protect Joe Biden. They let statute of limitations on certain charges pass. They failed to pursue the Bribery and Foreign Agent Registration Act and much more substantial charges against Hunter. So first of all, he admitted to several significant crimes related to federal tax law and influence peddling. Now, was he charged with influence peddling? No, but the government put all that part of the evidence. He's essentially admitted to it all. Now, why would he do that? No trial, and this isn't going to be in the news for the next 2 months. And now he'll be able to get pardoned by Biden later in the year, for sure. Hunter guilty plea further ensures no further public airing of Biden's racketeering operations details. Pardon next. I'm convinced. And of course, we're already in court demanding answers in all the Biden scandals. So we're not going to let this slip away. Congress is letting it slip away. The media has zero interest in it because of partisan ideological reasons. And so it's up to independent groups like Judicial Watch, again, to go into court and do the independent heavy lifting to uncover the full truth about this scandal. And now that the case is over, we're going to be asking for a lot more documents, and they're not going to be able to withhold a bunch of documents they otherwise would have because of alleged pending other proceedings. So we're just getting started, even though we've got a dozen plus lawsuits and many more FOIA investigations than that into Biden family corruption. And speaking of the Benny Johnson issue reminded me of the other corruption that popped up. There's a kind of a ha-ha but outrageous corruption story that popped up again with Fani Willis, the Fulton County Democrat politician trying to jail Trump for exercising his rights as a president and a citizen to contest an election. She showed up at an incident with her friend, again, Mr. Wade. And I was on Benny Johnson's show talking about it, and I thought you'd enjoy the discussion. Let's go to that.
In closing here, Tom, and I know that you've come on many times to quite hilariously and entertainingly talk about one of your favorite people on the planet, which is Big Fani Willis and Nathan's Hot Dog. You're the one who said that obviously she needs to be disbarred and potentially criminally investigated in Georgia. Her daughter was arrested, and in the cop body cam footage, there's this funny Easter egg. I think we can pop it up as a play beside here of Nathan Wade. So apparently they're still like hanging out. They told the court that their relationship is over, and here they are like in plain clothes, like going on vacation together. What's going on here, Tom?
Oh, come on, Benny. It's our lawyer. It's purely a legal relationship. There was a legal crisis, and out of every criminal defense lawyer in the entire Atlanta metro area, the elected district attorney of the most populous county could only think of one man to call.
Yes, and he's in there in a t-shirt. He's there in a t-shirt. So it's cool.
Well, I'm just glad to see that the romance continues, despite the pressure and the world being against them.
Well, and as I went on to say, it does, to be more serious, it does show the kind of contempt for the public, the rule of law, and the whole court process that they're still hanging out together, doesn't it? And so that case with Trump, I mean, that's all the way up in the appeals. There's significant issues about whether or not she can still remain on the case. So hopefully that case eventually goes away without much extra time and expense and attention from even President Trump. But there are other Americans caught up in this, innocents, who are only caught up in it because they were on the wrong side of the divide politically and ideologically. I mean, these are tough times for our republic and the rule of law when it comes to our elections and such. I mean, if they're telling you, if you oppose or raise questions about an election, we're going to put you in jail. And so, we're talking about the victory Trump had in New York. you know, he's still being harassed here in D.C. over his willingness to contest an election. And he's being harassed still down in Fulton County, even though it's all on appeal. It looks like that may eventually go away. And other Americans have been harassed in other states by left-wing Democratic Party prosecutors and officials and activists. So they know what they're doing. It's not only retaliation for 2020, but they're looking forward to 2024, and they're saying, if you contest 2024, we're going to put you in jail. That's essentially what they're saying. So, what's next? What else aren't we supposed to talk about? What else are we supposed to drop into the memory hole? Oh, the fact that President Trump was nearly murdered about 2 months ago, and that the government is hiding virtually everything they have about that situation. The Secret Service failures, the FBI failures, the Biden-Harris administration failures to protect President Trump and the lives of other Americans who were at that rally. Now, as I've told you previously, Judicial Watch has been second to none in filing freedom of information requests at the state, local, and federal level for records. And to the credit of local authorities in Pennsylvania, they have produced records to us. They gave us videos of the police body cameras and other cameras that were put all over the media a few weeks ago. And we got some new pictures, or a new picture of the shooter. We had the video too. I don't know if we're going to play the video, the body cam footage. It's worth playing if we have it.
Fucking this close, bro. Dude, he turned around on me. He's straight up.
Okay, we have 2 civilians attending to him.
I don't know. Who's got eyes on him?
Back up.
Seriously, he was right where you picked me up, bro. He was on that left side.
We have a unit on the roof.
Affirmative. Yo, Tess, you got me up once, bro. Yo, Tess, you got me up once. Get me up again. One more. Ready? Ready? Yep. All right, ready? Ready? Let's go. 1, 2, 3. Yep.
So some pretty dramatic stuff, and there's more at our website and on our YouTube channel, etc. We'll provide links to it below. But we haven't gotten one document from the FBI and the Secret Service despite multiple FOIA requests. And there's a variety of legal excuses they use. Usually they just ignore the request generally. And so Judicial Watch has filed its first FOIA lawsuit against the Secret Service for records that relate to the failures of security around President Trump. And the Secret Service had lied about whether or not they had denied requests for extra security from Trump's team. And I talked about our finding in our lawsuit in this video here.
Hey everyone, Judicial Watch just filed its first FOIA lawsuit on the Trump assassination attempt This lawsuit was against the Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security, over its repeated rejection of requests for extra security by the Trump team. Now, the Biden Secret Service lied about its rejections of Trump's requests. And if they had granted Trump's request for extra security, the assassination attempt arguably could have been prevented, and an American citizen would be alive today. So on top of the scandal about lying, about denying protection to Trump, they're hiding records from the American people. And that's why Judicial Watch is doing the heavy lifting in federal court to get the full truth about the Trump assassination attempt, which in the end is a massive government scam.
I mean, it truly is. And this lawsuit is right on target in terms of trying to get key information that hopefully, if released, will lead to accountability and, frankly, better protection, because it's desperately needed, because the Secret Service is completely out of control in terms of cover-up corruption and misconduct. I talked about the DEI obsessiveness with the agency a week or two ago. And here's the specific request. All records, including emails, email chains, email attachments, text messages, video, audio recordings, et cetera, about requests for assistance between or among the Office of Secretary, the Office of Deputy Secretary, Department of Homeland Security, and the U.S. Secret Service, referring or relating to any potential increase or additional protective resources to President Trump's protective security detail. Now, reportedly, they've asked repeatedly for extra help, and it's been denied. And initially, the Secret Service lied about it. On one day after Trump was wounded in the Butler rally, as we report in the release, the Secret Service spokesman claimed that increased protective service requests from Trump's Secret Service detail, that the fact that they had been denied, or reportedly denied, were absolutely false. He said that claims Mayorkas, who runs the Department of Homeland Security, so the Secret Service is an agency within the Department of Homeland Security. Mayorkas said that those claims that he had denied it was baseless. But then the Washington Post reported later in July that the Secret Service had repeatedly denied requests for additional security at Trump events for 2 years prior to the July 19th shooting. Secret Service agents on Trump's detail had requested magnetometers and additional agents to assist with security screenings at large public gatherings Trump attended, as well as additional snipers and specialty teams at other outdoor events. And there, the spokesman admitted to the Post that, oh yeah, what we said before wasn't true. But they only found out about it after the July 13th shooting. No, they didn't. That's a lie. I mean, who are they kidding? The Biden-Harris Secret Service lied about denying President Trump increased protection requests and is now trying to cover up that deadly scandal. The Biden-Harris administration has yet to release one record about the Trump assassination attempt under FOIA, which is why Judicial Watch is now in federal court. So this is the beginning of many, many lawsuits, because we have at least 24 requests pending about the assassination attempt. I think his life is still at risk, and if you're not following it on the news, from whistleblowers talking to Josh Hawley, the senator from Missouri, or Susan Crabtree, the reporter from Real Clear Investigations, I encourage you to track their reporting. I don't know where we'd be without some of these whistleblowers. And Judicial Watch increasing pressure to get the full truth out officially. Dan Bongino, another good source for analysis here, I mean, he's reporting that they had, Hawley reported this. He had a whistleblower come to his office, it sounds like, who said that the Secret Service extra security up in Butler was provided by Department of Homeland Security staff, whose only training was a 2-hour video, significant portions of which did not play well and did not work. So they were ill-trained and maltrained and expected to protect Trump's life and the lives of everyone else there. And you can be sure it's still happening. Bongino's confirmed it's still happening. They're using ill-trained, people not equipped for the job to protect Trump. It's an emergency. And to me, this ought to be apolitical because I'm concerned about the safety of Harris and Waltz and President Biden and the other former presidents like, Bush and Clinton and Obama and company. They all get Secret Service protection. I mean, that agency is a mess. How do I know? The proof is in the pudding. Go back to that picture of Crooks. Look at him. They had the police close enough to read his phone. Skinny kid there. Oddly looking, an odd-looking young man, to be fair, to be truthful. He had a drone providing himself intelligence shortly before the event. He had a more sophisticated intelligence operation, it sounds like, than the Secret Service did to protect Trump. And don't forget, as Dan and Susan Crabtree and others have pointed out, and the Secret Service is now, we're getting more admissions from the government. The Iranians have been wanting to kill Trump for years, and they just arrested someone in a plot to do so. So these threats are much more substantial than the typical, well, he's a well-known public political figure, and there's going to be people who are motivated to do him harm for a variety of reasons. Here there's like a national security issue involved. So I'm glad Judicial Watch is at the courthouse doing the basic heavy lifting to get basic information about the security crisis around protection for President Trump. Because I think his life is still at risk, and we can't, as far as I'm concerned, we can't do enough to expose what's going on. So we have a kind of an unusual story out of the Pentagon. A senior official in the Pentagon was recently indicted for an involvement in dogfighting. It's kind of, I guess it's a more significant criminal activity than many of us know. Every once in a while, who was the football player that got caught up in the... Vick. Who? Oh, Michael Vick, that's right. He was doing dogfighting down in Virginia, wasn't he? Well, this was the former U.S. Department of Defense official, Mr. Frederick Douglass Moorfield, Jr. He was Deputy Chief Information Officer for Command, Control, and Communications for Office of the Secretary of Defense. So I don't want to overstate how senior he was, but relatively senior. He'd been there a long time and was in an important position. And he was indicted along with another individual by the Justice Department in October of 2023. The Justice Department announcement was a federal grand jury returned a 10-count indictment with conspiracy to engage in an animal fighting venture and other charges related to the alleged establishment and promotion of a dogfighting ring. And so he's a senior government official, so we wanted to know what was he doing? Was he what was his pay, and that sort of information is typically available under the Freedom of Information Act for certain public officials. So we asked for records about his payment, his salary, disciplinary records, and any records related to dogfighting from the Pentagon. We want to know who knew what and when and what he was doing to earn his salary. And we received the following details. He, over 2 years, earned about $2.5 million. His most recent, I think, year, he earned about $300,000. And I'll leave it to you to decide whether or not that's an appropriate salary for doing the work he does, certainly in the Pentagon. But he was also, according to the documents, allowed to voluntarily retire after his indictment. So you get federally indicted and the Pentagon lets you voluntarily retire? How does that work? We have all the details about his salary and his different job titles. I think the more important thing is that he was allowed to voluntarily retire. As best as I can tell from these documents, he has all of his, he's had no issues about his retirement spending or funding or, you know, his benefits he gets after he leaves. Stars and Stripes describes the affidavit from the case, which indicates that authorities have been investigating dogfighting ring, which calls itself the DMV board, for years. 9 fellow dogfighters were indicted in Virginia last year, and 8 have pled guilty and cooperated with investigators. Members communicated on the Telegram messaging app after trading fighting dogs, exchanging videos, arranging fights and wagers, and comparing methods of killing dogs who lost fights. So it's quite the business. Also was subject to investigation by the Department of Agriculture and other federal agencies who raided homes in September of last year. So it's a real operation he had going. And as I noted in our press release, the Biden-Harris Pentagon has a peculiar HR approach. Fire good men and women who object to forced COVID vaccines, which is what happened, including very significant individuals within our armed forces, but allow indicted individuals to voluntarily retire with full benefits. So it's a very curious case, isn't it? So a lot going on at Judicial Watch. We have some court hearings coming up this month in the next 30 days or so on election integrity, on woke racist discrimination in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Big Supreme Court case to be heard at the end of the month. So a lot coming up here at Judicial Watch. And of course, Judicial Watch will continue to report to you on all these other issues we're talking about in terms of the lawfare against Trump, the Secret Service failures, and the dire situation we're in after the revelations that there's no one running the store at the Secret Service, practically speaking, after Trump's assassination attempt. And of course, we have these election issues with non-citizens voting, potentially without much in the way of having to worry about voting and being caught. Lot to track, and Judicial Watch is committed to tracking all of it. And the other big news, of course, is that we have a book coming out. It's available for purchase now. Rights and Freedoms in Peril, an investigative report on the left's attack on America. Buy the book now. Go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever you purchase your books from and purchase it now. It's a great way to support Judicial Watch. It's a great little book. They can't censor it. It's going to come out October 15th, and you go and purchase it, and you set it and forget it. And it will be your go-to guide for examining what happened since 2020, essentially, here in Washington, D.C., from COVID to election integrity to the immigration invasion to the mass censorship crisis that we're facing now, that began just before the 2020 election and just metastasized under the Biden-Harris regime. So it's an important and timely book. I encourage you to purchase it. Not because I'm the author, not because it benefits Judicial Watch, but because it will educate you and everyone else who reads it. So with that, I'll see you here next week on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.